Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. Today, I'm happy to have with me author Violet Lemay, who has illustrated 44 books, six of which she also wrote. Her clients include HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, and others. And her latest book, Let's Be Friends, which I have here, won the BookFest First Place Award for Diversity in Children's Books. So, Violet, how are you doing? So glad that you just joined us today. I really enjoyed your book. I read it to my 4-year-old son, and he loved the illustrations and all the other wonderful messages that you portrayed in the book. So, Violet, can you please tell me about what you do for a living and how you got into this career?
Oh, sure. Thanks so much for having me, Natasha. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, well, I've always been an artist ever since I was a kid. And when I was in high school, I got very, very interested in scenery and making scenery and costumes for plays, musical theater and plays and all of that. And I ended up going to a theater conservatory to get my undergraduate degree in theater design. And I moved to New York City after that, and I was a designer, theatrical designer for 5 years or so before I realized that I was having a lot of success, but I was unhappy in my job. And so I decided to switch careers, and I went back to school to study illustration. And yeah, so I got my master's in illustration and started illustrating right away. I was very lucky, even when I was still in school, I was getting illustration assignments. But I started out as an illustrator for the adult editorial market. So I spent 10 years illustrating for newspapers and magazines, and I had a wonderful agent. She's still an agent. She's amazing. But when my son was born, I got interested in children's books, which I had done when I was earning my master's. I studied children's book illustration, and in that course we had to write our own books. And I had written for kids before, and I had taken a playwriting class and stuff when I was studying the theater part of my life, and any class that involved writing, anything with writing, I was always fine with. Art and writing, those are my things. Math and science, not so much at all. Anyway, though, so yeah, when my son was born, I started getting increasingly interested in illustrating children's books, but the agency that I was in didn't handle children's books at all at the time, because the pay rate is just drops off a cliff when you illustrate a book. If you look at like how much do you make per unit of art or per hour, or however you want to look at it, you just don't, at least at the time, you didn't make nearly as much. And I'm sure it's still true, illustrating children's books, but I really wanted to do it. And it took me years to make the decision to leave her group, because I loved her and I still love her. We're friends. But I had to find a new illustration agency that specialized in children's books, which I did. And yeah, so I started illustrating children's books then. And for a while, I had a job as an art director for a small independent publisher in the United States. And I learned so much about publishing when I was in that job. And I was part of every decision that was made, including what books to include on the list, And so I was reading manuscripts, and as I was reading them, I knew I could write these books. And when you're an illustrator, it's kind of like the opposite experience of being an author. When you're the illustrator for a book, you have to be generally, and you wait to be invited into the project. And so you're always promoting your work in general to art directors and editors, hoping someone will like it and think of you when they read this amazing manuscript and they think, oh, that's the perfect match for this story. Unlike the author who's pitching the story ideas and the stories in the actual writing. So I knew that if I could start writing books, I could, take a more active role in my own career. And yeah, and plus it just, what's not to love about writing children's books? It just looked like so much fun. So I did start writing books, and I think it was 2012 or 2013 that my first book was published, that I was the author and illustrator of. And yeah, since then, I think it's been 6 books, and those are the books I've published. I've written tons more than that are still, hopefully will find a home someday. But all for kids except one that's an adult gift book, but the rest are all children's books.
How fun. I mean, I have 3 kids myself, and I read to them all the
Mm.
time, and
Mhm.
so I love children's books. So I want to talk about the publishing process. So you mentioned you had an agent, and then I think you parted ways. So when it came to publishing, how did you publish this? I mean, you're very well connected from your resume. You know, you worked with the big five, I think, or now they're the big four. They keep
Mhm.
changing.
Mhm. I
Um,
know it's
but how did you manage to publish all your books? And I just want to talk about, because you know the publishing industry is constantly changing now with all the Amazon publishing and self-publishing.
I
So if
know
you can
it's
take
in
us through
flux.
your, yeah, if you can take us through your publishing journey.
Yep. Okay. So, well, as I mentioned, yeah. So I was in an agency that specialized in editorial, and then I switched to a different agency, new to me, that specialized in children's books. So I do have a children's book agent,
Okay.
and so I'll talk to you for a minute about that, but I'll talk about the other also. So anyway, yeah, and during the pandemic, and actually right before the pandemic, my son is grown. He's nearly 21, and he had a weird, unexpected, crazy health problem. He's totally fine, but
Okay.
it was quite something. And we were living in China at the time, and it was just such an extraordinary thing. I lived in the hospital with him through the whole thing. I was journaling and sketching him and
Oh, wow.
the whole thing. And I showed all that to my agent afterward. He was fine, and he is fine. But I showed it all to her and was just wondering, can you see a way that I could make this into a book? And she said, and then COVID happened, which is why we left China. So all this was happening right as all that was kicking off. And she said, I like what you've done here, but maybe don't be so literal. Take all of this like energy about health and channel it into a book about staying healthy for little kids. And so that's
Ah.
what I did. And I wrote this book first, which is about basically just staying healthy and showing love to yourself and others in a time of sickness, right? So healthy, love, love, love. Well, she sent this to HarperCollins, and the editor there, this is just crazy. This doesn't happen every day. And it hasn't happened to me since, but she loved it. They bought it almost immediately, and they wanted the whole thing within like 6 weeks, which was really cool. So they bought this one. Oh, you know what? I'm messing up my story. They bought this one second. This was the first one.
Ah, they
Backing
bought this
up.
one for. Oh, wow.
This
Okay.
one, okay,
Okay.
so we were living in New Zealand before we lived in China, and we were living
Okay.
in New Zealand when the terrorists attacked 2 mosques in Christchurch, which was completely horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mentioned how I sort of channeled this little personal tragedy with my son into this book. Well, a similar experience with this book. So yeah, I wrote a book about that for kids that's about
Ah.
loving everyone. And
Was it
my
the
agent
attack
sent it to
on the mosque in New Zealand? Yeah.
two
Okay.
mosques in
Yeah.
Christchurch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first time I wrote the book, it was called What Matters. And so the way this book is set up, every time you open it up you see a spread, and it's kind of like verses. Like in this case, this is a fashion spread, and it's serious versus silly. Can they be friends? And then you lift the flap,
Uh-huh.
and it says, indeed, underneath it all, people are people. Of course, they can be friends, basically. So every time you turn the page, it's a different scenario, but it's this versus that. Can they be friends? But when I first got the idea, this terrible, terrible thing happened in Christchurch, and I was just wondering why it matters that people, like, why do people's differences matter? Why can't we get along, basically? And so I had that same idea, but in the original version, it was called What Matters, and it was this versus that. Does it matter? And when you lift the flap, and the answer was always no, it doesn't matter. And I sent to my agent. She liked it. She sent it to HarperCollins first, and the editor at HarperCollins liked the idea. She took it into a meeting, and apparently they had a huge discussion about it, and they sent me back some notes saying, "This is very interesting, Violet. We like it. We all talked about it, but these things do matter, obviously. You know, if you are this color or that color, if you're raised here or there, with or without money," which was one of the concepts that was in the first book that didn't make it into the original, or didn't make it into the final book. Those things affect your whole worldview. They matter. So we like the idea, but you need to work on that some more. And so then I totally panicked and freaked out. She gave me a month to fix it, and I did fix it, but it was having a book published by HarperCollins would have been a very big deal for me, and so I was so excited, and was just swirling for weeks trying to figure out how to reformat the book and rewrite it. But yeah, eventually I rewrote it so that the question is always, can they be friends? And then when you lift the flap, the answer is yes, which was just more cheerful and positive and optimistic. And I took out some of the concepts that, like, for example, I had in the original version, as I mentioned, like your socioeconomic background. Does it matter? Why can't we all get along? Just took that out.
And why is that? I'm just curious. Why would the publisher decide?
Did they? I can't remember, but it might have been that they mentioned something about it. And when I was trying to fix it, that was just such a frenzied process of, I had maybe, let's see, if there are 22 pages in this book, that means there's 11 different spreads, 11 like categories, but I probably had like 20 categories in my list and I kept shuffling them around, trying to figure out which ones to keep in the book. And ultimately that one just didn't make it. And it was problematic. They mentioned it and I couldn't figure out a way to fix it. And so, just that's the only reason why I really left it out.
Okay.
Yeah. But the one thing that made it in that I was really excited about is religion, because that's what, that was like the germ of the idea from the beginning. And I always thought that was going to be the one that would be troubling, that they wouldn't want to include in the book, because it's just not a topic most children's books discuss in this way, unless it's a book for a certain religion. This is saying, let's all come together and love each other, no matter what our religion is. So, or no religion, whatever it is. But yeah, no one ever mentioned it. So it just slid on in there, which was great.
And what I liked also about it is there's something that I always talk with my kids about, if girls and boys can be friends.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's the concept, because I think sometimes my son gets teased, my 4-year-old, because most of his friends are girls, but he's just sweet, and but it's so I read that to him, and I like that I read this kind of him, and I don't think I've seen that before, about how like your friends can be girls or boys or serious and silly. So it was a very, very nice, sweet story.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So how did this book do? It was published when, like when was
December 21st of 21, so right before the new year. Yeah, I gotta tell you, I really don't know. I don't know. I could ask and find out. But
did you get any negative feedback? I mean, I always ask about the negative feedback, because that's part of the author's journey.
That's part of it. Of course it is. Yeah. No, I have not heard any negative feedback. There are some nice reviews of it.
That's nice.
But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to check on sale. I don't usually ask about. My husband had a book released some years ago, and he was obsessively checking Amazon Author Central always to see how his book was doing, and it was driving him crazy. And it would never even occur to me to look at that. I just am like anxious enough about everything else in my life. I don't need to be looking at it like a stock chart. So as a rule, I just don't ask.
That's a good rule. Like, enjoy the journey, not the destination. Journey before destination.
That's right.
So what's next for you? What were you working on now that this is out, and now you're based in and
Malaysia.
Malaysia. Yes, you're based in Malaysia
Malaysia.
now.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we expecting a Malaysian themed book, or
Oh, Malaysian theme.
uh,
Interesting.
what's next now? Because you're a word traveler, so I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
influences your writing. So I'm just
It
curious, what's
does.
next? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, I've written many, many, many more books than I have published. And I have written travel books for babies and that kind of thing. I just finished writing a upper middle grade novel, which I wrote sort of for my son, who's a musician. He's a classical pianist. And
Nice.
yeah, I spent not this past summer, but the previous summer, whenever that was, that must have been the summer of 2021, I guess. I spent all summer writing that book. And then when September kicks in, I get really busy typically with other things, illustration work. And so I had to kind of put it on a back burner and had it edited and took classes and blah, blah. And then this summer, he read it and gave me some very prescient notes. Really, really good notes, actually. I was very
Okay.
proud of him. And yeah, I went back and did those rewrites, and now I sent that one to my agent, and she's trying to help me find a home for that book, although she specializes in working with publishers for younger kids. But anyway, so that one is close to my heart because it's my boy. And, I'm working on books for other people, books that other people have written that I wish I could tell you more about, but not yet. But I have a whole list of ideas. I'm about to have knee surgery, which is kind of a bummer, but I'm going to be recovering from knee surgery. And so I have a list of things I want to work on, even just to keep my mind occupied.
Yeah.
So I have a few story ideas. One of them actually is inspired by traveling in Malaysia, but it's not Malaysia specific. It's
Okay.
scuba diving.
Ah,
Yeah, my
nice.
husband, 2 summers ago, we went on a little trip, and for the first time ever, he introduced me to not scuba, but snorkeling.
Snorkeling, yeah.
Yeah, we went snorkeling, and I used to be just terrified of the ocean. I'm not a swimmer. I don't mind being in a swimming pool. Not a fan at all of just being out in the open water. I don't like
Yeah.
things touching me. I
Yeah.
just have this fear of that's going to be my end. I just sort of drop like a rock. I mean, I can swim, but I just don't like it. Anyway, though, yeah, he really changed my opinion of that in such a dramatic way. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And so I have ideas about how to make that into a book. And that's the thing I'm going to be thinking about while I'm convalescing, I guess.
Ah, nice.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I hope a speedy recovery. Well,
Oh, thanks.
maybe you can just read. That's the best time to read.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I
Yeah.
have a big list of things. And I actually have bought a few books that I've been so tempted to read because by some of my favorite authors, but I can't let myself read them because I'm waiting until I really need them.
So you mentioned working with authors. So I'm curious about that. Do you work with independent authors? Like, can I just go now and say, Violet, hey, I just have an idea for a book for children, which I actually do.
Mm.
And I was like, hey, can you do the illustration for me? Or are you
Hmm.
like, too big to work with,
Oh,
small,
well,
small authors like me?
I know that I'm not quite sure how to answer that because the technical answer is I have an exclusive contract with my agency. So
Okay.
I personally can't accept any jobs that don't go through my illustration
Okay.
agency. So
Okay.
it would have to go through her. But if something went through her and it was not for a lot of money, and she, she tells me, I guess she tells me all of them. I think she tells me all of them. Maybe she doesn't. But the way she's explained it to me is that, yeah, she'll show it to me and I can either reject it or accept it or whatever. But if it was a project that I really liked and it wasn't for very much money, I would certainly consider doing it. But that's how it works.
But you can like put me in touch with them, right? So now I would say,
It would be, I guess the way that would work is that would be you approaching her to hire me. That's how it would work. That's the only way that would work
Okay. Okay.
because
But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's all about connections in the publishing world.
Mhm. I know, I
Um,
know.
okay, so I'm gonna shift gears a bit and
Mm,
ask about what is exactly happening with publishing world now, since you're
mm,
pretty plugged in. I just want to hear your thoughts. Where are we? I mean, I've seen a lot of authors who are just quitting their agents and they're just going on their own, self-publishing, and they're making a lot of money, especially on Kindle Unlimited and any other and other platforms, especially fantasies and series.
mhm.
What's going on? Do we need agents? Do we even need
Oh,
the publishers? Do we need the gatekeepers? What is happening?
oh. Well, that's a huge topic, a very interesting topic. Yeah, I've got thoughts on all different parts of that question. What's happening is right now, everything is very slow. Whenever there's a threat to the economy, all of the arts are the first to feel it, you know? And because of the crash in 2007, because of the real estate market crash in the United States in 2007, which totally wiped out so many magazines and put so many newspapers in jeopardy, and was just, the arts took such a profound hit. When COVID happened and all of the rest of it, even before the financial markets started to become unsteady, I think all the publishers got very nervous. And I also think, and I love publishing people and artists. I am an artist. I'm sensitive. I get it. But I think there's a personality type that's common in publishing that just like wants to be nervous about everything, like all the time,
Okay.
and talk about it and how bad things are going and things are always tenuous and what are we going to do? And I mean, if it wasn't this, it would be something else. There's always something. It seems to me, I don't know, as an observer of the whole thing. But yeah, things are for sure slow now. My agent tells me nobody's buying anything right now. And I know that's not literally true because certainly people are getting contracts, people are. Publishers Weekly is still publishing every week all the contracts that people are getting, and there's tons of contracts that people get that never get mentioned in Publishers Weekly.
Okay.
So it's all still happening, but it's probably slow right now and will remain slow until the economy picks up and everything starts reopening for real. I know the whole world is suffering because of COVID. I mean, so many businesses closed and people are really struggling, and that just makes it tough to publish a book or be a musician or be a fine artist or whatever. I was talking to a fine artist just yesterday who had to close his gallery because of COVID, and he doesn't know when or if he'll ever be able to reopen it. It's just, the world is just in a strange situation right now. So for those of you out there who are wanting to pitch your manuscripts and get a traditional publisher, I would say take heart. It's still an industry, and it might be slow at the moment, but things are still happening and it will pick up and it will recover. And I think people will always read, and the world will always need books. So just keep writing and take heart. And now about the rest of it. So self-publishing and hybrid publishing. So not that long ago, even there was a stigma to self-publishing. It was considered a vanity press and and all of that. But that's really, really changed. Even before COVID, that was changing. And I have positive feelings about it and some negative feelings also, which are, I think sometimes the hybrid publishers, so what a hybrid publisher does is works with authors to publish and distribute their books. And I think that's great. Really great. They hybrid, like if you're in children's books and you need illustrators and designers and all that fancy stuff, they'll provide all those services as well, and they charge you for it. So the author bears it, if not 100% of the cost of all that, a big portion of it. And one thing I take issue with is that the way sometimes some hybrid publishers present themselves to authors, the authors come out under the impression that was not a hybrid publisher, that was a book publisher, like a traditional book publisher. And I know authors, I know this happens because I have author friends who are under that impression. And
Okay.
I don't know, I think that's unfortunate. I understand why that happens, but I wish it didn't. Just for the sake of the authors who are going through it, because they should know the truth of how publishing works, all aspects of it, the good and the bad of all of it. So anyway, as far as people making money in self-publishing, I'm sure that there are people who make money in self-publishing, but I also know many people who self-publish their books, and then from that point on, you become a book salesman, and you can become a book distributor. And if that is something you want to do, then I think fantastic, go for it. Do it. But if you don't like the idea of having a garage full of books and having to sell them throughout the rest of your life, then it's hard to sell books. That's why the publishing industry is so competitive. Like if you walk into a Barnes & Noble and just look at all those books and ask yourself, how is somebody going to find my book if Barnes & Noble accepts my book, which is even iffy, if their buyer will accept your book, and then if they will display it, because you have to even pay to have them display it with the cover out.
Yeah.
If you don't pay that, if the distributor or you or the publisher doesn't pay that extra fee for shelf awareness, then they're just looking at the spine of your book. And so how are they going to find it? So, and I know people shop online now and find books online, and there's all that, and that's changing everything too. But yeah, it's just a very, very super challenging business. So I think it's just important for people who love to write to really love to write and focus on writing because you love it. And then investigate all the different ways of publishing your book. I would say don't limit yourself to one idea of how your book is going to be published. There's no harm in sending it out to publishers, and first do your homework for sure, so you don't waste your own time. I think, and it's tax deductible too, because it's part of your job. You spend a whole day at the library and then another whole day at the Barnes & Noble just researching books until you find the publisher that you think is going to be interested in your title. Your title will complement their list. And it's super important to read very fresh titles so that you can see what's been published in the last 3 or 4 years and who's publishing what. And then target those publishers. And if hopefully they're taking submissions, then submit to them if you are interested in being published by a small independent publisher, a medium-sized publisher, or one of the big ones, whoever it is. I almost think it almost doesn't matter if I think there's this like mystique around the big 4 or big 5, whatever. You really want them to publish your book, and that's really cool. And I have been so honored to have been published that way, and I'm so excited that happened. But I've had wonderful experiences being published by very tiny presses also. And when a small press publishes your book, they have so much more invested in your book that they're so much more willing to work with you to market it and to promote you. And so I think it's important to not limit yourself to one idea that you want to have, that your dream is to have your book published this way or that way or whatever. But just write the book, do your homework. The publishing journey is a journey, and it can be a lot of fun to do all this research and figure out even just how to submit your book here or there. Follow those steps. And while you're waiting for some big publisher or small publisher to pick up your book, you can investigate hybrid publishers, self-publishing, chart it out, weigh all the options, and then just see what your budget and what your what your interest level is for the lifestyle that you want after your book is published. Because the choice that you make about, and it isn't always your choice either, it's not my choice that HarperCollins happened to publish this book. I just got really lucky, truly, and they published this book, but I didn't choose them, they chose me. So, and I've submitted probably 20 books to HarperCollins, and they picked up 2 of them. But if I could choose, they would publish all of them, but it just doesn't go that way. So that's not my choice. Anyway, that's my advice. I would be open-minded about all of it and just be smart about it and really know what you're getting into. Because some of those hybrid publishers are terrific. I've got some author friends who have worked with hybrid publishers who are very involved in helping the author market the book and market themselves and distribute the book. And distribution is a huge part of sales, you know, and if you have a team behind you who's working on distributing the book, then that just simplifies your life so much. And it's really worth it to if you're going to find a hybrid publisher, to find the one that gets good results from their distribution.
Yeah. What about readers? Are people still reading? I mean, with the advent of iPhones, like I remember when I first moved to the US 17 years ago, before people even like had iPhones, and people would actually read on the metro. Now, like probably maybe I'm really among the few that still read on the metro. Everyone else is on their phone. And I've actually seen the shift, at least on the DC Metro. But have you? Do you think people still read?
Well, I still read, but I know what you're saying, Natasha. I think it's becomes, you know, maybe COVID is part of that too. I don't know, but I think everybody just got so lulled into like a funk, you know. Like I feel like we all need to go whitewater rafting or something and fall in the water and get shocked, and then shake it off and just get back to life, because everyone's just so shell shocked. And I don't know, maybe that's sort of part of it. Like everyone's sort of in this lull. I hope there are readers. I mean, I'm certainly no expert to know if there are or not, but one great thing about children's books is children read and parents read to children. So that market is always there, you know, because school, kids read in school. You know, they say before, I think it's before third grade, fourth grade is where kids have to choose to start reading on their own. When they start reading chapter books and all of that. But yeah, the children's book market is always booming. There. Yeah. And it's an art form, you know, each age group, age range of kids' books is its own unique art form that needs to be studied and practiced and all of that. And yeah, it's a very interesting way to write.
Who's some of your favorite children authors that, you know, you used to read to your son?
Yeah, well, one of our favorites was Kate DiCamillo, who wrote Because of Winn-Dixie and many, many, many other books. We just read so many of her books for sure. She was the favorite one. Actually, I'm about to attend what is it? I'm blanking on the name of it. Some panel discussion. She's the Children's Book Insider. Children's Book Summit. Children's Book Summit happens every October, and Kate DiCamillo is one of she's like the guest speaker. She's the top tier guest speaker, and I'm really excited
that's
to have her
nice.
talk. Yeah. But yeah, she was my favorite. I still read her.
Well, that's really nice. Dr. Seuss.
Of course.
Yeah. Which now takes me to the issue of some controversy in children's books, which is happening most recently. Like every day we hear about this school district pulled out this book from the library, and this book pulled this out. So I'm curious, where are we with this shift? Like, so your book focuses on diversity. It's a very important topic. There are other children books that include some important themes, but not all parents agree with them, like LGBT issues. So where are we when it comes to children books are controversy, and how do we solve this heated debate, if we can ever solve it?
I know. I don't know if there's a way to solve. I feel like everything in the United States has become an argument lately, and I feel like people are just looking for the next thing to argue about. And what can you do to solve it but just let it fizzle? I don't know. I mean, how much energy does anyone have to keep arguing about this? I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I've heard all kinds of different solutions pitched. They all sound great to me. You know, I'm not a politician. I don't know what goes on at parent-teacher meetings and school board and all that stuff anymore. My son is grown and he's studying in New Zealand, where these things aren't happening. So I don't know what the answer is, Natasha. I think it's a sad state of affairs. But on the other hand, if you want to look at the bright side, at least people are talking about books. And it's interesting because I feel like I don't know. I've seen so many different news clips about all this. I have a lot of different thoughts. I was going to say, I saw a few little snippets of textbooks where things were worded in such a way where I thought, oh my gosh, that I can actually see why this got put on the list. I wouldn't have put this on the list, but okay, I get that. And then there's other ones where I just don't understand at all. I feel
Yeah.
like the people who are suggesting that these books be banned haven't even read them. So
Yeah.
it's just all, you know, huff,
And
huff,
it's,
huff.
yeah, and it's interesting. It's like from both sides of the debate. Like you have the left and the right, who,
Mm,
because in the past we would kind of accuse one party of being more into book banning while the other, but now it's actually both sides are doing it.
I don't know.
And as you mentioned, the school boards and meetings, they're becoming very contentious.
I know.
Lots of heated debate about children books, and I even heard it from fellow moms who got really mad about something they read online, and they called the school and they said, I don't want to make sure if this book is not in the library.
Mm,
And again, it's from both sides. So I mean, I'm staying here, no, I'm not blaming any side or other, but from both sides. So is that a new phenomena? I mean, I haven't seen it, like I haven't witnessed it in the past as much I'm witnessing it now.
I mean,
Where
I think it's happened periodically.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. And I mean, how old am I? I'm 55. So in 55 years, I feel like I've experienced 5 or 6 different book banning episodes
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
news or whatever. And usually I think the author's like, yes, because when my book gets banned, obviously people are going to buy it. So why not ban my book? Go for it. But
Yeah, well,
you
that was
know,
in the past, but now things are going more to the extreme where like institutions are being forced to cancel the authors' events by all these social media campaigns, or like to deplatform or to cancel or all of that stuff. So, things are like shifting in very precarious ways, I
they
think. But
become more
anyway,
personal for sure. It
yeah,
becomes more personal, more against the author, but people could still buy the book. Um,
correct, correct.
so
I like what
it's
happened with
just a shame.
Salman Rushdie as well.
Oh my God,
That was really like
shocking.
dangerous,
I
shocking and
know.
dangerous. So it's, as I
Horrible.
said, from both sides of the debates, what's happening
Oh,
now, it's really dangerous.
I
Um,
know.
so what advice do you have um and I'm not sure if you think that's a good idea for a mom who wants to write a children's book, and
Ah,
and that's something I felt like most of the authors who the children authors, they started as mothers or as parents. Is that true? Or I guess except for Dr.
oh,
Seuss. I don't think Dr. Seuss had kids, did he?
I
I
don't
think he
know. I
had.
don't know much about him. Theodore
But
Geisel.
yeah, but
Yeah, I have a
I
lot
mean,
of advice actually.
is that feasible, or just that's just a dream? And where do they start? Like, okay, I'm just a
Mm,
regular mom in the suburbs of Chicago. I have whatever, let's say 2 kids and a dog and white picket fence, and I read to my kids all the time, and I have a dream of writing a book. Where do I
mm,
start? I
mm.
mean, I don't know
Yep.
anything. Let's say, let's pretend I don't know anything about publishing industry. I just have a story and I wanna, right, where do
Hmm.
I start?
Well, if you have a story, that's fantastic.
Okay.
That's a great place to start.
Okay.
um,
Okay.
but yeah, I think okay. So writing for kids, as I think I mentioned earlier, it is very different depending on which age group you're writing for.
Okay.
And so there's so much help online for anyone who's interested in writing a book for kids. And the first thing
Okay.
I would do is Google it. There is just, and this didn't exist when I was getting started.
Okay.
But yeah, there's just tons and tons and tons of offers, authors offering seminars and organizations you can join and books you can read about how to do it. When I got started, a friend of mine suggested I look at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Authors.com. No,
Okay.
Children's Book Writers and Illustrators.com. It's .org, scbwi.org. Still exists, thriving organization. They have tons of information that's free online, and you can
Okay.
join for a nominal fee. And they have local groups that meet, so you can meet with other people and mingle and get to know them. If that's your personality and you want to do that, that's really cool. But yeah, I just, at the time, this was like when the internet was invented. I think their website was brand new, and I just downloaded these 2 or 3 like how to write a children's book little pamphlets and read them. And at the time I bought a book. It was a hardcover book that still exists. I looked it up recently. It's called How to Write and Illustrate a Children's Book and Get It Published. And it's even been updated recently. So I just had those 2 things, and that's how I got started. That's all I needed to know. But if you want to write, you need to understand the different types of books for the different age groups, because it affects the word count. And not that you want to start counting words from, your first scribbles on the page, but I think it's good to go into it generally knowing, am I writing a picture book, with where the art is going to tell part of the story, and how do you even do that? Or do I want to write a chapter book for early readers that's a little bit longer? Or am I writing for middle grade? Or am I going to make a very simple book for toddlers, which is what this one is, like a board book. So yeah, it's good to know the different age range. And then just start writing, find a critique partner, critique group. There's tons of those available online. A great one that I was exposed to recently is called Inked Voices. Anybody can join there. It's really cheap, and you get, if you are looking for a critique group, you can get put in one that with a group of writers who are writing the same genre or age group that you are. And yeah, you can find exactly what you're looking for that way. Yeah, it's a really nice group because they also offer classes. And oh my goodness, yes, for example, I mentioned I wrote the novel, and I took a class called First Pages, where an editor from HarperCollins read everyone's manuscript. And so it was an amazing course, because at the end you got to submit your manuscript to the editor from HarperCollins. So classes like that for whatever age range, they have them all.
That's nice.
But yeah, and of course the most important thing to do is to read and read and read and read and read tons of children's books. And I mentioned that earlier, but I can't stress it enough. It is an industry. And if you're super serious about getting published, it's very important to know what gets published. And yeah, like a picture book is its own unique form of art. Even if it's not written as a poem, it's prose, and the words have to work with the art. And that's not up to the author necessarily, or at all, because famously, when an author submits a picture book manuscript to a publisher, if the publisher buys it, they just sort of discount all of your art direction, and they work with their art directors to make up their own art direction. And they select the illustrator and all that. But really, really good picture books that, like Mac Barnett, those kinds of books, the pictures do tell part of the story. The words don't tell the complete story. And those are the Caldecott winning books, So when you're reading it with your kid, it's so fun because you linger on every page. You read the words, and then you're investigating the art to figure out the holes in the story. And then you turn the page and the whole thing happens again. And the art just carries you through. So it is an art form, and it takes some getting used to.
Like the book Who Stole My Hat, or I remember.
Yes, I want my hat back.
I want my hat back. Yeah, this one.
It's amazing.
You have to look at the illustration to understand what happened with the hat. Yeah, that's very interesting. So do you think that the industry is welcoming of new authors who've never done this before? As 100%. I said, like you're a suburban mom who just has a story idea, or because there's another trend that I noticed recently, which is celebrity children's book.
They come and go. That's a constant, I think.
Is a constant? Like suddenly,
I don't think it's a trend.
Is that a trend? Suddenly, all these celebrities are publishing all these children's books. Because the celebrities started having kids, and then there's suddenly all these kids' books, and of course they can publish it easily, whether they're good writer or not, because they have the connection. And that's for me is the sad. That's for me is the sad part. Is let's not forget the suburban mom who has a great idea, and is there hope for and it's just how welcoming are you to this person with one idea who has no collections.
Well, I have great news about that. Yes, I think all publishers are very eager
Okay.
to find new voices. And about the celebrity thing, look at that. The bright side of that is those big contracts for those big publishers. That's what drives in tons of money for them, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's good for all of us. That's what keeps them going, which keeps us all going. So go for it, Jimmy Kimmel and all of you other night shows celebrities. Write your books and just keep us all going.
Yeah.
We love you for it, for real.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all fine. All that stuff is good. But yeah, I mean, so if you look, because I told you I was researching publishers for this novel that I wrote, and many of the publishers have on their guidelines for submission, we are actively looking for new voices. We want new voices. I definitely think there's room for all new people. And, you know, if you look at it from the perspective of the publisher in this time where everything's a little bit rocky and unsteady, they probably even more than usual want new voices because they can probably pay you less because you'll be willing to work for less and you wouldn't even necessarily know the difference. So
yeah, you're not Stephen King, you know, you're not, so you know, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I know there's room for new people. Always. Publishers are always looking for new voices.
That's good to know. I mean, you're an insider, so we're getting all the secret tips.
It's so funny because I guess I am. I don't feel like that at all, but I guess I probably am.
Okay.
Because if you work in publishing for many years, you're going to be an insider, I guess, just because you've been published so many times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been very fortunate to work for tons of publishers.
Well, that's good to know. So for anyone who's listening now, you know how to reach Violet. She'll give you all the trade secrets.
Yeah.
But all right, this been wonderful, Violet. Do you have any final thoughts before we conclude? Any comments on publishing children's book? Any advice to anyone who wants to start in this fun and wonderful business?
Definitely. I would say, first of all, if you have a story, write it because it's your story and who else is going to tell it? You know, tell your story. The world needs your voice. And to everyone, no matter where you are in your writing journey, I would say just never, ever give up. Never, ever give up. Because what happens to most people is they give up. And if you just don't give up, that'll give you an edge. And who knows what'll happen over time, you know? People change jobs all the time in publishing. Maybe your book got rejected 100 times, but the 101st editor who looks at it loves it. You just are never going to know. As a matter of fact, I mentioned Kate DiCamillo. That 100 number, I got that from her. One of her books went to at least 100 editors before it was picked up. And so if that can happen to her, it can happen to you. So goodness gracious, don't give up.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yeah. And on this note, we conclude this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Violet, for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening or watching, and until we meet again.
Thank you, Natasha.
You're welcome.